And, ooh, thank you. Recording is in progress. Yes, so good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Linda Dowley. I'm the College Information Specialist at La Jolla High. This is a part-time job, which is funded by the Foundation of La Jolla High. So I always want to thank the foundation for making this position possible, and thank all of you who donate to the foundation, which makes this position possible. It is a part-time job. Even in the before times, pre-COVID, it's not a job where I have an office on campus. I'm not a employee of the school district. So I give programs, I write my weekly columns, I administer the Facebook page, LJHS College Info, and then I work with the PTSA and wonderful Marcia Brandstetter to impart some information through various programs. So that's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hopefully get started. There we go. Slideshow, and we're off. So again, welcome. That's kind of who I am. And all of this program today to sort of turn down the temperature of this college search and application process. It seems to be, people get very wired up about it, but stress comes from things that you can't control, and actually you are the consumer. You are in control. You decide where your student decides where to apply. You set the parameters for what is affordable for you and for your family. So don't let the process make you crazy. Excuse me. There are some things that have changed due to the pandemic. Excuse me. Some things that are true broadly, some things that are true for only a very tiny subset of schools. So we're going to talk about the differences. And the goal here is to inform you all and let you know that there are a lot of different choices out there for you and for your students. So what are the broad trends? What is true for small subsets? How are admissions decisions made? What does holistic admissions actually mean? Talk a little bit about the increasing costs of college, because it's pretty frightening, but to understand that most people don't pay the full sticker price, and what you can do to make college more affordable through your actions and your choices. And then talk a little bit more about testing, because boy, there's so much confusion still around testing, what test optional means. So the state of college admission, there are so many things that people think that really aren't true. It's so hard to get into college. No, it's really not into most colleges, into a very, very tiny subset of colleges. It's hard to get in, but approximately 80% of colleges accept more than 50% of their applicants. The average admit rate is over 2/3, it's about 67% is the average admit rate for colleges in the United States. So thinking about these tiny number of schools that actually educate a very small percentage of the population, sweep that aside and don't worry about that. Understand that there are a lot of different places. And there are only a few good schools. I had somebody ask me, I want to talk about how does my child get into a good school? You know what? What's a good school? You have to set your own criteria. Where is a place where your child is going to thrive and gain the skills that they need to go on and lead a happy and productive life? That is a good school. College applications are surging, and it's so hard. It's even harder to get in than it was before the pandemic. And that is not true either. Again, that tiny number of schools have had far increase in their applications. And there's probably a reason for that. And the idea that some kind of Midland kid says, well, they don't require test scores anymore, so why don't I just apply to Stanford? You never know, I might get in. I think that accounted for a very large percentage of the increase in college applications at highly selective schools. So at highly selective schools, applications increased, but at many colleges, and particularly community colleges, enrollment dropped dramatically. And that's actually not that's pretty troubling because community colleges are a great entryway into social mobility and getting people kind of on a rising escalator where they can, gain skills, improve their lives, transfer to four-year schools. So yeah, this giant surge of admissions is not necessarily happening everywhere, not by any stretch of the imagination. So college is asking for anything more than grades and test scores, then they are doing holistic admissions. It means that they're looking at the whole student, at all parts of it. They're asking for many things on the application, including essays and activities and potentially test scores. But, they sometimes are looking for examples of character, of collaboration, of how the student engages with the world around them. When they want to know really who the student is, that's holistic admissions. And that's what most schools are doing. They want to understand context. That is a phrase that comes up all the time when talking with college admissions people. It's context is understanding who a student is within their environment. So are they living in a single parent household with several siblings who they're trying to look after at the same time? Are they, living in an environment where they have lots of different opportunities? So if a student is at a school, this is, academic as well. If they're at a school where we offer 21 AP classes and the student's taken one of those, but if a student goes to a school where only 2 AP classes are offered, and they've taken one of those, well, hey, that means they're taking advantage of the academic and educational opportunities that are offered to them. So that is kind of what a college is looking at. The most important thing that they always consider is the transcript. And this is even in the before times, even in the pre-COVID world, where schools were interested in test scores. Many, really did place a value on them, but that always has every counselor every admissions person I have ever heard speak says the most important thing is the transcript. And often, test scores had a place in that. We're going to talk a lot about how that may have changed at many schools, but the courses that you take and the grades that you receive are really the most important thing. And so parents of younger students, if you can encourage your children to do well, that is going to set them up to be in a position to potentially get offered, to have more options. More doors will be open for them, more opportunities for merit aid if they do well in school. If they're not a really sharp academic kid and they don't do well in school, they will still have plenty of options. Colleges talk about late bloomers, particularly boys being, who bloom a little later. So you're never out of luck. Don't ever think that all the doors have closed, because that's not true at all. But this is just a little bit about how colleges look at students and what they're looking for. So the University of California uses something called comprehensive review, which is very similar to holistic admissions, but they used to have these 14 points of things that they looked for. They're now 13 points because they no longer consider SAT or ACT tests at all. They will not even be seen by an application reader if a student has scores and sends them in. They do still allow a place for scores to be submitted on their application. And that is because if a student is ultimately admitted and enrolls at a UC school, those scores might be used in class placement. Oh, well, they did so well in, they took whatever they can test out of a basic English class or into a different level of math, that sort of thing. The comprehensive review and the 13 points, those are online. You can look at what they are, to see what the school is looking at. One of the things that I do want to tell families is that it used to be, oh, well, I worked so hard and then I applied for college in the in the fall of my senior year. So I don't really have to take hard classes my senior year. I can really, slack off my senior year. That's not the case at all. Colleges want to see an upward trajectory both in your performance and in the rigor of the classes that you take. So you do report what classes you're taking your senior year on your applications for the UCs and for in the Common App and the Cal State app. You do record those. So it is important for students to know that they need to not feel like they get a free pass their senior year and that they can just, do nothing. No, you need to keep on that trajectory and keep up your good work. So what are colleges looking for as they read these applications? Well, as I was telling before the recording started, I've been on a ton of webinars these last few weeks and hearing from college admissions reps, deans, enrollment managers, college presidents, actually, also talking about things that they are looking for in students. So some of these are things that they look for as they read the applications. They're looking for evidence of these things. Authenticity. Arun Ponusamy, who runs college, or he's a bigwig at a company called College Nov, who put on a lot of these webinars with a lot of great information. Don't try to be impressive. Just be who you are. That's what a college wants to see. They talk about in your essays, when you use all this flowery language, that makes them think someone else has been contributing to your essay. Just be authentic. They're not looking for perfection. They're looking for students who are curious about the world around them. They're enthusiastic and want to learn more. They always want to know how students spend their time and why. So if they're, you'll see in the activities section, you're going to be listing what you do. They want to know why you've chosen to do what you've done. There is no hierarchy. There is no, joining the robotics club is much better than being on the, soccer team. No, everybody loves something different. They just want to know what you're doing. And just last night, one of the reps from Tulane was saying, and jobs are great. They teach kids, responsibility and time management. So a part-time job, whether it's, bussing tables or, frying up French fries, that's also a fine thing that colleges like to see. It shows the student is doing something and sort of engaging with the world around them. They want kind kids. They're looking for students to really be a good part of their campus. So that's also what they're thinking about. In all of this, we can talk about, who you are now, who you be, blah, blah, blah. The bottom line is also parents and students need to understand what they're looking for is to fill their institutional priorities. So through all these things, they're looking for students who will contribute on their campus, who will be great members of their campus community, but they also have their institutional priorities. We need more women in STEM fields. We need a trombonist for the marching band. We need a new, whatever, quarterback for the football team. They have their own priorities. And at some point, some of this is out of your control. You are who you are. And they are pulling from all these applicants to pull together a class of students that they think will create a great community on their college campus. If they need a, brown-haired, 6'4", marine biology major, and you're a short whatever, you can't fill that spot for them. It's nothing against you. So just understand that there are some things that are out of your control. Control what you can, and then move on. Find a good list of schools that are going to be a great place for you. So unfortunately, testing is not fully going away, although it's fascinating to hear these college admissions deans talking about how their policies moving forward may not be set for the coming years, but so many of them are very hopeful that the test optional situation will either remain or the test will go away completely. I think as they have seen the outcomes of how students are performing, students that didn't submit tests, how they're performing on their campuses now, they're able to really determine what will happen going forward. So, test optional. So that means that if a student has taken a standardized test and wishes to submit their score when they apply, that a college will look at it. But it means if a student does not submit a score at a test optional school, that student will not be disadvantaged anyway in the admission process. Test flexible is a concept that sort of arose. Anyway, some schools will allow other tests. If you say, I can't get an SAT, but oh, we want to see your AP test, your IB test, and then test free, which used to be called test blind. So those are interchangeable terms. That means even if a student submits a score, it will not be seen on the application by the application reader at all. Again, as I said, like the University of California, it could be considered for placement later on, depending on the college's policies. So it's not a new practice, test optional. The National Center for Fair and Open Testing, fairtest.org, has been keeping track of schools that do not offer testing. Prior to the pandemic, there were over 1,000 schools in this country that did not require standardized tests for admission. Obviously, the scope and scale of the test optional thing escalated dramatically during the pandemic when they couldn't be offered safely. So the University of Chicago was kind of the first highly selective private school to go test optional in 2018. And Caltech is test free. I'm not entirely sure how long that has been, but that's been for several years. Indiana University of Bloomington, they became test optional right before the pandemic. So there are a lot of big name schools that have piled onto this. University of California system became test free kind of right as and during the pandemic. And that was initially because of a lawsuit that was brought saying that these tests are discriminatory. And then the more that the regions kind of looked into it, or the academic bodies at the University of California system, they decided, no, we want to be not only test optional, we want to be totally test free. We're not going to look at it. Now, for a while, they were saying, we're going to come up with our own test. That's a bad idea. Fortunately, they have set that aside. They also then said at one point, maybe they would use these smarter balanced assessments that are offered in public schools in the state of California. Fortunately, recently, they said they're not moving forward with that either. And that would be very problematic. Private schools don't offer those tests. Yeah, that would have been a bad idea. So at the moment, the University of California, for the foreseeable future, is completely test free. So this, as I said, this is not a new thing. It's been a long-standing conversation that these tests are not only not equitable, but they're not predictive of a student's college success. And then the other thing that is kind of fascinating, and this became very clear during the pandemic fairly early on, testing policies at universities are not, it's not the admissions people that say, oh yeah, we don't want to use those scores anymore. It doesn't come from them. For public schools, sometimes it's written as part of state law. In the state of Colorado, during the pandemic, they were still requiring tests because it just took such a very long time for it to make its way through their legislature to even understand. They're like, well, sure, we still need tests. Well, the tests were not being offered anywhere because of the pandemic, and nobody could test safely at that point. So it is kind of fascinating to hear on being on these webinars and when people are talking about test optional policies and what they'll be doing moving forward. Often if it's the admissions dean that is speaking, they often have no idea what the policy will be going for. Not that they don't have any idea, but they don't have control over it. They are not the ones in charge. It's at a private school, it could be the board of trustees. At a public school, as I said, it can be anything like state law or the board of regents or something like that. So it's more complicated and not as easy to shift quickly. But hopefully the rise in test optional policies and understanding that when schools say they're test optional, they really mean we will not disadvantage a student who cannot take the test. Hopefully they understand that's really true. And they say, I have a better use of my time than to spend a ton of time and a ton of money prepping for these tests. It's time consuming, it's expensive, it doesn't need to happen. So what does this mean to students as they decide, should I test? Marcia was saying before, when we were talking, that many parents and students feel they still need to test because that little bit, I'll drive to Arizona, I'll do whatever, because that little bit of extra may help my application. Well, you know, it could be. There are some colleges in the US that still require tests. Public schools in both Georgia and Florida require students to submit test scores with their applications. Now, Georgia Tech is a very lofty, awesome school. And Rick Clark is their dean of admissions. And when he was speaking, he was saying, you know, unfortunately, that is our state law. They still require standardized tests, but we have an extremely low bar for the test scores themselves. Yes, you must take the test, but you don't need to, you know, be outstanding. He said, and at Georgia Tech, they're actually not going to be using scores in their application reading. Again, they don't feel that it has been predictive of student success. So the schools that have had a 1 year or a 3 year pilot policy or whatever, most of them are trying to get some clarity about what their policies will be going forward. Because any of you on here that are parents of juniors, you have just taken the PSAT and you need to see about when to test going forward. So often there are math components to the test that will make it advantageous for a student to take it a little bit later on, not in the fall of their junior year, unless they're very far along in math. And sometimes if they're very far along in math, they will have forgotten some of the concepts that are going to be covered on the SAT or ACT. It's kind of a whole mixed bag there. But usually if a student takes it in the spring of their junior year, and then they can take it again in the fall of their senior year. Most colleges will accept tests taken in the fall of the senior year. Sometimes it used to be you could take it up until December. With the increase in early admissions popularity, often colleges will want you to have taken the test before you apply. So that would mean you need to take it in October or as early as it's offered that you can secure a spot in order to get the score submitted around the time that you're submitting your application. But remember, if your college is test-free or your list is composed of schools that are test optional and you don't want to test, then by all means, test. So you have tested, you have this score. Should you submit it? You don't always think that that's part of the equation, you know. Should I prep? Should I test? Should I send? But should I send is actually a big deal because it really varies depending on the school you're attending. If you are taking the ACT, which is on a scale of up to 36, and you have a 30 and you're applying to Ivy League schools, don't send that score. That is not a good score for Ivy League schools. For highly selective schools, that's not a great score. For most other schools, that's really awesome. So again, it's about looking up doing your research on your colleges, about being strategic. You want to know, will this score strengthen my application? Is it in the top tier of the school's admitted student profile? And that's why it's going to vary school by school. You should be strategic, and you can realize you can submit to some schools and not to others. So if you have this, 30 on the ACT, or you have, 1,300 on your SATs, 650 in each section, and you think, should I submit that? At some schools, that will be absolutely outstanding. Absolutely, go ahead and send it. At other schools, it will not strengthen your application, and you really should not send it. So that adds another whole layer. There was a fascinating conversation thread with a college counseling group this morning that includes college admissions people and people on the high school side, and saying that just adds one more layer of complexity and decision-making to have to, suss out this information and decide, should I send it, should I not send it? So unfortunately, test optional has not necessarily made life easier. That's for sure. We will see going forward the fact that both SAT and ACT canceled so many tests at a moment's notice. It earned them some very bad PR this year. But often students would have stories of, well, I showed up at the testing site and no one was there. And then there was maybe a note on the door saying test canceled today. That is so lousy. That's a lousy thing to do. ACT and College Board, they've got the email addresses for all these kids. They make these choices about canceling tests. They could at least communicate with these students. So anyway, I'm not a huge fan of these testing companies. It really varied though during the pandemic, who could test and who couldn't. Different parts of the country were, they were not having issues. They were still offering the test. So it really varied who was able to test and who weren't. But when you talk to the admissions people now about what the results were last year, that you're really finding that schools that were test optional, they say that most, it's really been in around the 50-50 range. Tulane just said, yeah, it's been pretty close. 51% of the incoming students submitted test scores, or I think maybe applied without test scores, excuse me. Again, Northeastern, SMU, Miami, Ohio, many of these private schools, they said, yeah, it's been about 50-50. Students who applied, students who admitted, and students who enrolled. It's all around half and half. And really, again, I would say if they drill down, that's probably going to be based on geography. But moving forward, what these schools are really looking at is students that did not submit test scores. How successful are they at their schools? And that will really be informative of how their policies roll going forward. I would assume that since, like we said, the students said, oh, Stanford's test optional, why don't I just apply? It's not like their other criteria for admission went away or diminished or whatever. They still, these highly selective schools still had the same standards in place. So the idea that this test optional has been a panacea and been so easy on everyone, no, that's not true. But many of these colleges do say that they received a great deal more applications from very diverse populations. And that to them was very beneficial. So that led them to think that they wanted to, be able to remain test optional and get these students to be on their campuses and add to their community. I want to say a little bit about the rising costs of college because it's gotten pretty crazy out there. So the rising costs and what you can do about them. So the cost of an undergraduate education has really continues to spiral upwards. Community colleges are the most cost effective, the least expensive option, and they're a great option for students. But you do need a student that's pretty focused, because community college is not for, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. You need to, if you want to get through there and transfer on, you need to be proactive about it. But they're definitely the least expensive way to start your higher education career. The Cal State schools vary in price. You can go online and just Google cost of attendance, Cal State University. You'll get a grid showing how much the cost of attendance is for each one. They vary in the high 20s to the very low 30s. The UC schools are about $10,000 more, from the high 30s to the occasionally closing up on $40,000. It's the private colleges that are a little mind-boggling. Out-of-state publics kind of really vary. Those can, we'll talk about that a little bit. But private colleges can be up to $85,000 a year for an undergraduate education. That's sort of shocking to me. But some private schools offer a lot of aid. And when you figure that in, it can make that school less expensive than even some of our public schools. And tuition discounting is something that families ought to understand and be aware of. That means where you receiving financial aid, either merit aid, just because they want you to come there, or need-based aid, meaning the government is going and the college is going to help you pay for the cost of college. 89% of freshmen get some sort of financial aid, also known as a tuition discount. The problem is if you're saying, oh, wow, this school costs $75,000 a year, but they did give me a $5,000 scholarship. Well, that's really nice, but $5,000 is, that's you still have to come up with that other 70, and that's not always an easy thing to do. So parents need to educate themselves about the financial aid process, the difference between need-based aid and merit aid. And, don't eliminate a school from contention of, don't say you can't apply there because of the cost. But if you use the school's net price calculator, which is a tool that every school is required to have on their website, and you run the numbers and you realize there is no way that we are going to receive any aid from this school. We're not going to qualify for need-based aid. You're not going to be in line for merit aid. We're going to be probably one of those people paying that full sticker price. Have that tough conversation in your family and just say, this is not a realistic choice for you. So use all the tools. ljhscollegeinfo.com is a website that I created during the pandemic when I realized that there's so much information out there, but it's virtually impossible to get anything changed on our school's website. So we've got our own website on college stuff. There is a financial aid tab that has a lot of information there about timing, with when you should apply, how you apply, a bunch of different links. And hopefully that will be helpful and informative to families. It also has different financial aid programs that have been presented over the years. So how do you reduce your cost of college? Well, you start with an open family conversation about finances, and you try and do it early in the spring and not in the spring of senior year when they say, I got into my dream school. And like, there's no way we're paying for that. That's always crushing. So please, don't do that. Have that conversation earlier on. Be strategic and intentional when you create your college list. And understand that a college that says we meet 100% of need, if you're a family that is going to need a lot of assistance to pay for college, and the college meets 100% of need, and you think, oh, that's great. Sometimes that need is loans. So it doesn't mean that you're going to get all scholarships. So that's really important. You want to look for schools that have generous merit aid. And how do you find that? You look either on College Data is a great resource, I think. And you can check them out under their Money Matters tab. It will show students without need who received aid, what percentage of students received aid if they had no need, meaning it was merit-based aid. And also gives you usually an approximate amount. DIY College Rankings is a great website, and the College Solution is also a great website and a blog. All of these resources are on the ljhscollegeinfo.com page. And there are other Facebook pages that are really valuable too. They have a lot of resources. Paying for College 101 on Facebook and Road to College. They have a lot of great advice. But families need to be open-minded, because some of the colleges that might be incredibly generous are schools that you haven't heard of, or maybe you're thinking, that's not where I envision my child going. But if it meets a lot of your criteria, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about having your students really explore and work on creating their criteria and their priorities. If a school meets your criteria, the fact that you haven't heard of Rhodes College in Tennessee, oh my gosh, they have the most beautiful campus. They have amazing programs. Be open-minded and say, oh, okay, well, let's dig a little deeper and learn about that. The other thing, well, here, we'll move on to this, assembling a college list, because that's really the important thing. That's where it all really starts, is the importance of having a good balanced list. So you want to have that conversation and, provide those parameters for your student about, what is going to work and, for your family. And just understand how many options are out there. There are so many options, and you have to create your own priorities for what's going to be a good school. I don't mean to be condescending, but some of the stuff I didn't understand for many years, that liberal arts colleges really focus on undergraduate teaching. Liberal arts colleges, or colleges in general, usually offer a bachelor's degree as their ultimate degree. They do not offer masters or PhDs for the most part. So when they're really focused on undergraduate teaching and learning, students get that great connection with their professors. Now, that's certainly possible at a larger school, but it takes a student who's mature, who's proactive, who's willing to march into the, attend office hours, willing to introduce themselves to the professor, willing to, really put themselves out there. If that's not your student, then maybe think about a smaller environment where they will organically get that close connection. If the student has a really strong affinity to a specific subject, I live, I eat, I breathe physics, they can certainly go a lot of places, but that you might have their school, you might have them research the schools on their list and see if they have core requirements. Because some students don't want to have to take gen eds or breadth requirements or core requirements. Meaning that a college says, we're turning out educated members of society here, and we expect them to have taken some courses in the humanities, some courses in the arts, some courses in the sciences. So they, have this core list of subjects that they want students to take. University of Rochester, for example, does not have any core requirements. Some schools don't, but a lot of schools do. And if you have a student who is fully in one direction and doesn't want to be bothered with anything else, research what the core requirements are at the colleges. As I said, community college is a great option, but students who successfully transfer to four-year schools, they are those that are proactive also. They meet with their advisors. They understand what courses they need to take in order to successfully transfer. They do well because it can be, some schools have a guarantee. Some of the UC schools have a transfer admission guarantee with our California community colleges. But if a student has their heart set on UCLA, Berkeley, or UCSD, those three schools do not have a guarantee. They still take 95% of their transfer students are from community college, but it's still a competitive process. So if your student is attending community college and they want to go to UCLA, they have to do really well. They have to know what classes they're going to take to fulfill the requirements. They have to meet with their advisor and meet with an academic, a transfer coordinator. So a community college is a great option, but it's not just, totally for students who are completely undirected. You need to have some focus there as well. And you can find your way by meeting with those people and getting those supports in place. It just, if you're going to be successful on the long run, you need to be a little bit more proactive. And if you have a student, as I said, those late blooming, potentially boys, that are not doing well in high school, but still have a desire to go on to college or see themselves in a career that is going to require a college education, even if they don't have a 3.0, there are still a lot of options out there. There are a lot of four-year schools. Several of our Cal State universities will accept students, admit students with under a 3.0. And there are many schools that will admit 95 to 100% of the students who apply. So just know that it is out there. For really high performance students, if you have a really stellar student, I would recommend that you look, certainly, they're going to want to look at those top tier schools, but look at schools that are on the next level down, because those are the schools that will really want your student and will give them all kinds of perks, potentially merit aid, honor status, research opportunities, early registration. I had a mom come speak to me after a presentation a couple of years ago. And it was the senior presentation about, making this final college choice and easing the transition into college. And I'm a single mom and I work as a dog groomer and my daughter got into MIT and I don't know how we're going to afford it. But I'm going to make it work. I'm going to borrow whatever I need. Education is very important to us. Like, okay, so education can be achieved at any school. And if a student was strong enough that they could get into MIT, they could have gotten into a plethora of other schools and gotten a full ride as an undergraduate and saved some more of those shekels and spent them on graduate school, if that was in the picture. Because you have to remember, at these college costs, graduate studies, if you want to go to med school or law school, you can do all that, from a lot of different venues, and you don't need to absolutely mortgage the farm to pay for your undergraduate education. And you shouldn't really, particularly if graduate school is part of the thing. One thing that I do want to say, though, is going back to liberal arts for a moment, Liberal arts are the humanities, the sciences, the social sciences. Some liberal arts colleges offer engineering or architecture, some do not. But it's important to understand that students go on to graduate programs from all over the country, from any number of schools. So liberal arts education, that small connection, that great, small class experience, that connection with professors, that can set students up for great letters of recommendation for grad school, for great research opportunities with professors during the school year and in the summers. So I just want to make sure that families don't rule them out because they may be a little bit more obscure. They may not have heard about them before. But the goal is to find your student a good fit, a place where they will academically, it'll be challenging but not overwhelming, a place where they'll be socially engaged, a place that's a good financial fit for the family, really a place where they will thrive. So when we talk about a place where students will thrive, Gallup Purdue did a study it started in 2014, and it was the largest study of its kind, talking to 35,000 college graduates, like 10 years after they had graduated, and talking about what made for a really worthwhile college experience. And these were the 6 points that they came up with. And they have continued to do this study every year and talk to more students. They've created a whole library of really interesting information. So, it's, as I said, purdue.edu, newsroom, Gallup, and I'm going to be posting this presentation online and post the slides online so you guys can look all these things up. But it's a fascinating course. And so I would like to think that you all will help your students think about these things as they're creating their list of schools. And are these opportunities going to be available to them at the schools that they choose to attend? So there have been a couple of questions about Zello. Zello replaced Naviance. If you had put information in Naviance, I'm so sorry. I wrote about it early on, and I think the counselors tried to tell students early on, but in September, you could access the Naviance information and try and download it off, but it's no longer available to us at all. Naviance is gone. Zello is its replacement. It has some great college search and match tools. It used to be part of a company called Career Cruising. So it has a lot of career exploration information on it. Counselors will be in junior classrooms next month to describe more about how to make use of it. But if there are any parents of seniors who are unclear about how to use Zello to request teacher letters of recommendation or counselor recommendations, they need to go see their counselor immediately and make sure that they've got all that figured out. And because Naviance was a big piece in the puzzle to get used a lot senior year to submit those applications, transcripts, letters of recommendation from both the counselors and the teachers. So if you have questions about Zello and your student is a senior, please make sure they go see their counselor right away. But if you're a junior or younger, Zello is available currently. I believe that you can access it through your Clever login. And then they'll go into classrooms, as I said, later. I think it's in December. They're going to talk about choosing courses for next year, and they're going to give a lot of information about how Zello works and its multiple facets. There are a lot of other search tools out there, and I used to absolutely love College Board's Big Future College Match. They have redesigned it and ruined it. And I'm always very gratified when I'm on listening to other experts, college experts, people that are, really great names in this field, and they say, that is now absolutely terrible. I'm like, okay, there was a big string telling College Board to please switch it back again. It's there. It's just much more clunky to use, I feel, than it used to be. But that is the website for that is on there. But there are a lot of other websites that have that can help with college exploration and scholarship resources. So College Data has long been one of my go-tos. College Express is a terrific website as well. CapEx is great with the scholarship information also. And College Navigator is a resource of the government, and it's got a lot of data and information on it. And that's another one that I would urge you to check out. Again, all of these are listed out on the ljhscollegeinfo.com page. There is a tab where to start, and it's got a lot of information about all of these websites and links. So when you're talking to your students and trying to help them understand a little bit more about what they want to look for as they create this college list, I urge you to think a bit beyond the idea of the size and the location. I think those are a great place to start, but there's a lot more to it. How do you learn best? Do you want to be collaborative? What was your favorite project that you've ever done? What is the class that you love? All these questions to dig a little bit deeper. The idea, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond? I worked with a student years ago, somebody near and dear to my heart, and maybe related to me. He said, I would rather be the best of the worst than the worst of the best. And I thought that was pretty articulate for a 17-year-old boy. This is my middle son. And I was like, oh, okay. So you know that wherever you go, you want to be able to be at the top of the heap and not go to an incredibly competitive thing where you'd barely be hanging on. He went to the University of Arizona and he graduated magna cum laude. So he was able to find an environment where he really thrived. I talked to another friend's daughter about that, and she was like, no, I really want to be somewhere where my peers will push me. That's where I find that I do my best work, is when I am really challenged by people around me. Those are really good things to know. And it just kind of takes a little bit of noodling to really think about that. So I urge you to have these conversations with your student. And then a little bit more broadly, what do you think a residential college experience looks like? The one thing to me that's always a deal breaker is if a school does not offer on-campus housing to freshmen. I do not want to send my child away to school and have them looking for an apartment somewhere nearby. Freshman housing, I think, is really important. Once they've been there, they can kind of learn a little bit more and decide to live off campus and whatever else. But talking a little bit about college living options is important. And then what do you want to do outside the classroom? That's important too. Boy, his ears must have been burning. He has just called me, my son. So are you interested in co-ops and internships? Do you even know what those mean? That's really important to think about all these things and dig a little deeper about what are the career services that these colleges offer. Those are important bits. And then to what extent will cost or financial aid influence your decision? That is, again, a really important part of the thing. So these are a couple of additional great things to look at and think about when you're exploring, great resources to help your kids explore. And just a couple of quick final thoughts. I'm talking more than I thought I would, so sorry about that. I will move myself along here. A low admit rate is not a proxy for value. It creates the notion that the scarcity, and that's a myth. So when you say, oh, all these schools, they have less than 10% admit rate. No, it's a tiny, tiny subset of schools. There are plenty of colleges to go around. So the name on the degree, sure, that might help get you in the door initially, but it's going to be much more important what a student does while they're at school. So again, that sort of speaks to my Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be by Frank Bruni, a really great book. There have been a lot of long-term studies saying students who were admitted to Ivy League schools but didn't attend because the cost was too great or for whatever reason, they attended a different school. In the long run, they did just as well as students that attended these Ivy League schools. It's the treatment effect versus the selection effect, with the treatment effect being like the Marines, we will take all comers and we will mold you into who we want you to be, or the selection effect where we're a modeling agency and we're only choosing fashion models to come be part of our group. Malcolm Gladwell made the argument years ago that Harvard is a modeling agency. When they are ranked so highly, that's because of the input. You're measuring inputs. They choose great students at the start. They don't turn out great students, or those students may still be great when they leave, but they came in that way. It wasn't the school that changed and created that great, that great student. One thing that has been very tough these last couple of years, and certainly during the pandemic, is to think that, oh my gosh, you can't tell who's going to get in where. It's all so random. And the dean of undergraduate admissions at Johns Hopkins said the other night, the process is unpredictable, but it's not random. And that made me again realize, yes, the institutions, these colleges, they have their own priorities that we are not privy to. As a college counselor, I don't know what their priority is. As an applicant, you certainly don't know what their priority is. So it's not random as far as they're concerned. They are looking at the applicants, but they are choosing, to admit students that will fit in with their vision. And it's just unfortunately not one that we can understand or really control. And I thought this was a great thing, that students try to fit themselves into the school's mold, but that's really upside down. You want to find a school that will fit your interests. Please forget about the rankings. Just be authentic to yourself and choose a school that's going to fit you, not making yourself into something that you think will fit that school. So how can you help is just to be educated about the process. And there's so many resources. These are all very self-serving resources that I put here. The weekly e-news column, I actually do spend a lot of time trying to be very timely and share information there. There's a column for juniors and seniors, but younger parents might benefit from reading some of the information, particularly for juniors. I try to kind of put a broader array of information in there. LJHS College Info on Facebook. I publish articles or share articles all the time. And then the website, ljhscollegeinfo.com. And the one thing I ask you, thank you so much for attending today, but please do not take over the process. A couple of listservs that I am on had posts from counselors saying, this parent just submitted their student's application and they hadn't even finished editing their essays and whatever. That's not your job. This is your student's path, their journey, their interests, their goals, their future. So it's really important to make sure that while you help guide them, it's an incredibly expensive financial investment. So you need to be part of that conversation, but don't take over the process. Your students can have a really hard time going off to college and registering for classes and managing their time and all those things if you don't allow them some autonomy in working through this. It can be confusing, but the La Jolla High counselors are there right now. They're meeting with students. At lunchtime, students can go in and see them and ask them questions, have a second look on their application, all those things. So please don't take over the process. Enjoy the process with your student. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see what I have missed. Oh, the CSS profile. Somebody asked about that. It's another financial aid form that is sometimes required by colleges. It's something that you have to submit if the college asks for it and you're trying to get financial aid there. So it's a very kind of an arduous form to fill out, but it's definitely something that you have to deal. And yes, and I'm sorry, like the Cal State schools, in addition to the UC schools, the Cal State schools are also test free at the moment, and they seem to be kind of walking hand in hand with the UC schools. Let's see, anything else? Oh, and the CTCL schools. Well, those are those liberal arts colleges that I absolutely love. Colleges that change lives. CTCL.org. Excuse me, I get so excited. I strongly encourage families to look over those schools. They really have their mission is to have a very student-centered approach to college admissions. It's 40 schools. They're very different from one another. They're all small liberal arts colleges, but their goal is to make this process, understandable, transparent, and even joyful. And they have great programs. So I really urge you to look at ctcl.org, the colleges that change lives. It was born out of a book by the same name, written by a man named Lauren Pope, who said, wow, these schools are really unique and they're really doing something different. And no, there are probably schools that if you're, you know, everyday Joe, you may not have heard of them. Juniata and Earlham and Hendricks, and you know, they're not everyday household names, but they are great schools. They offer great programs, and they're another worthwhile thing to know about. So thank you guys all so much for being here today. I am going to post this recording and the slides on the LJHS College Info Facebook page. I'll try and do that by the end of the day today. So thank you all so much for being here. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thank you.